Blast from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hi, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery. On our second segment of today, in our Blast from the Grassroots, we are going to promote a book that's called Faith in Society. It's a book written by Dr. Denison Jayasooria. He has a long history as a public intellectual, and today he's going to share his life journey and thoughts, and also just to share more about what is the role of being a public intellectual. So welcome to the studio.
Yes.
About your book, Faith in Society, what inspired you to write a memoir about your life's journey and thoughts?
This year, on September the 3rd, I turned 60. And
Really? You are 60?
Yeah, this year.
Doesn't look like one.
Doesn't look. Oh, thank you.
Still energetic.
This year is very historical for me. One, I turned 60, and I also became a grandfather very recently, a few days ago, when my daughter Jayasooria gave birth to a baby girl. And that also is a new experience because we then move into the fifth generation of our family as being part of Malaysia. Now, the inspiration to write this, of course, my wife who co-writes this book with me, Rose, encouraged me to document my own life journey and the lessons through it, as well as document some of the thoughts that I have published or spoken about. And this is more as a contribution to knowledge and a contribution of sharing to others as one moves older in life, that you want a legacy of some of these things to be remembered, and possibly as an inspiration to new advocates, new academics, new activists who will be emerging, who might know or might not know the challenges, the issues, the contributions, the criticisms that one faced. And so it's in print now. And as we put it together, it kept going on and on. So it comes to 634 pages.
Wow, there's a lot of things that you
documentation.
share.
Yes.
Let's start with your childhood. What kind of child were you? Did you have this spark in your life when you were a child that I want to be a public intellectual?
I think my parents were concerned because I didn't speak till I was 3 years old. This is what my late mother told me. And my school days, both primary and secondary school, I wasn't a very good student compared to my older sisters who have now passed away, or my younger brother or younger sister. So academically, I was quite weak.
So you were a mischievous student or what?
Yeah, some would call mischievous. I think if you read the book, the former principal of my school, who was also a family friend, writes about many of these kind of misdeeds in my childhood. But I think I was more distracted from classroom in those days to a lot of extramural activities, including games, literary and debating society, the Christian fellowship, the MYF in the school. I was on the athletic team, I was on the games team, I was on inter-school debates and other things. So school life was actually a very enriching experience, and our family lived a cycling distance from school, and I cycled to school from secondary onwards.
So what kind of friends you had at that time? Was it like all Indians, or was it a different kind of Malaysia at that time?
Yeah, I think my class had a good mixture of Chinese, Indians, and Malays. Of course, it depends on what unit of activity. So whether it was the football or whether it was cycling around or
But
camping.
what was society back then? Was it different from today?
I think a small town like Banting in the district of Kuala Langat was a fairly small town. Then we had one theatre, but we didn't have a supermarket. So a lot of the activities for young people centered around the school football field or the district football field. And the community was much more close-knit. My dad used to know all the senior people in the district, like the district officer or the OCPD or the principal of the school or the shopkeepers, even the sergeant in the police station would know all of us,
I see.
either by name or because when we used to cycle, we automatically got down from the bicycle and pushed it across in front of the police station, because often we had a very big-sized Punjabi man with a big moustache who used to stand. But those were part of the childhood experiences where I think society was not being defined in a very materialistic sense of the word. I think the notion of community or even family together, I think it's a different period of our lives. We were still rural, Banting, but it was a town within a rural area in contrast to the tremendous developments of a place like Banting Town in the context of KLIA
And
all the other
mega
developments
developments.
and the modernization that
But-
stepped into our country.
But also, one significant point in your younger days were religion, because you studied theology as part of your undergraduate studies. But you also work as a pastor at one point in life.
Yes.
Why religion is the center of your life?
Yes, I think most families, like my family, had very strong sense of family values and community values. And I think as a young person who was also active in the church, and there was youth activities and this call for workers. And so at that point when one was reflecting post Form 6, where one should place your life and priorities, and I think that was the time when other pastors in the church context, we were part of the Tamil Methodist Church in Banting and at the national level, that they called and challenged young people to take up theological studies. And that's how I went in and felt a sense of God's calling. Now, I think it's important for a young person like me who seemed to be sort of mischievous
I couldn't imagine that now when you say it.
younger period, to then be molded. I think the experience of being in India studying in a theological college for 5 years helped me mold and mature as a person. And there was also the instilling of personal discipline and purpose of living, and the theological studies that brought in other aspects of related social science. So it was not just theology, there was elements of psychology, anthropology, sociology, politics, and things of that sort that then put you in a place to play a role, as it were, in society. So although it started off in a more narrow community of the Christian church, but it was the message and the values that had application and relevance to wider society, the nation, and the global community at large.
How does theology shape your intellectual life later on?
I think I have jokingly told people that if I had not done theology first, because I did theology first and then moved on to sociology, if I had gone to sociology straight, I think I might have ended up as a Marxist thinker.
Atheist.
And possibly even an atheist in the kind of early 70s, late 60s kind of intellectual framework of sociology and social change and political thought that was very leftist in orientation. I think what theology helped me do was have a worldview which is theistic in focus. But theology also helped me have a compassionate heart and a concern for society. But because of theology and sociology and taking the sociological, analytical tools of poverty, oppression, wanting to impact society for change, either through a religious change of the person or some impact to society, which then led me into my work after graduation in theology, into the plantation sector and also into Orang Asli villages. I was often in the prisons, and these exchanges, or in the drug centers, extent, then began to reveal that change cannot just take place at the individual level. There are societal and institutional transformations that need to take place. So individual, family,
So it was a
society.
calling for you to care more about society and try to
Yes,
quantify this in an
think, yes,
intellectual way.
I think it's theology that led me into sociology, and to then find and appropriate. I could have taken on psychology, which will then be more individual-based, clinical and therapy. I think I was more drawn to working with people on the ground, to communities that were poor. Like, for example, I went in those days near Taiping to a plantation in a small estate in the outskirts of Taiping called Pondok Tanjung Estate, and then found the reality of exploitation, discrimination, marginalization of a community that was hardworking, that didn't have electricity, water supply. They were contract workers in the plantation because the management was in a contract situation. And that then begins to raise questions on justice, rights, fairness of the economic structure, trade union movement. And these then have political implications as well, because there is a famous Catholic thinker from Latin America, bishop, who said, when I help the poor, they call me a saint. But when I ask why are they poor, they called me a Marxist. Because the questions of why are people at the bottom, why is there poverty, why is there inequality, why is there corruption, then those have contestation and conflict with people in power. So it could be people, it could be institutions, it could be the bureaucracy, it could be the informal sector like gangs or the underworld that might have power. And this contestation of power at this level and the analysis and wanting to bring change is an explosive and complicated thing. But I think my faith experience then keeps me at guard. And for some who have moved on further in this work of social and community transformation to enter politics and things like that, I've worked with the institutions of delivery. Some of that work has been effective. Some of that work has weaknesses and failures to it. But it's theology that led me to sociology. And in the sociology, as sociologists would say, Malaysia is an urban society, but anthropologists and sociologists are a dying breed in this country. So you need to, I think economists or, people are more interested in medicine. Of course, there are a lot into legal profession. But I think the monetary considerations and jobs tended to move people into certain types. So social science, sociological inquiry, critical assessment of urban society. I think that's quite lacking in our society. And I think government needs to give more incentives for people to take on these anthropological or sociological analysis, especially of urban society. Because as you yourself know, inequalities have risen, the emergence of the underclass in the urban areas.
But it's often a rare topic to even being discussed, either
Yes.
on the top or on the
Yeah.
bottom level.
Yeah.
And from there on, it seems like you were very much in tune with human rights issue in this country. But how much of the human rights issue that you work on really touch on the reality on the ground?
Yeah, I think my work in the pastoral context in the Methodist Church and subsequently with the Malaysian Care had elements of a rights framework, but not strong enough. The work in the Yayasan Strategic Social, which was working with the minister for almost 11 years, had the element of trying to access into the public sector and working within the system for change. So the rights framework did not surface as much as challenging unjust structures or questioning the state, because one was trying to work from within to rectify it. But I think it was really my work in the Police Commission when I was appointed, and subsequently for 2 terms, from 2006 to 2010, with the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, and now my current role in PROHAM, in the Society for the Promotion of Human Rights, that addressing these issues as human rights violations have become center for. And I think the relationship between ethnicity, citizenship, using a human rights framework is most critical. And the literature at the global level, there's an explosion of that kind of writing and analysis. Unfortunately, in the Malaysian context, even in the post-Mahathir period, the language of human rights has suddenly become unpopular, and it's presented as an antithesis to Islam and an Islamic approach, which I think in many ways is a distortion of both Islamic teachings and thinking, and also of a more philosophical approach, because the dominant theme is one of free market and one in which
Trade liberalization.
yeah,
in a way.
and capital and the position of human beings or citizens or even non-citizens not surfacing from the point of rights and a rights framework. I think the UN has developed this much more. The Human Rights Commission of Malaysia has articulated this. But the current federal administration seems to be dragging its feet. And even as recently now in a discussion on the National Human Rights Action Plan, they are saying we want to build a human rights action that has a Malaysian model. It goes back to the old Lee Kuan Yew and Mahathir thesis of Asian values.
Asian
values. But that's a distortion to the global commitment through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, through the commitments of the Federal Constitution locally, through the aspirations for democratic society, through the aspirations of Vision 2020, then we are seeing that some of the distortions at the public level, especially by the bureaucracy and sections of the political elite, is actually disastrous for Malaysia in time to come, because it's not consistent, one, to the federal constitution. It's inconsistent to Malaysia's international and global commitments to the United Nations. It's not even consistent with our commitments in building a global movement of moderates. And so we are caught in these distortions at this moment. And it will require quite a bit, not just of intellectual discussion, but a certain amount of honesty in public policy and discussion, and personal integrity, political integrity, to stand up for truth, to stand up for justice, to stand up for rights, fairness, and justice. So this is the real struggle for a Malaysia that is reaching 2020.
You have a lot of concerns, and definitely you have been working really hard since the beginning of your career to be a public intellectual. But what is the exact role of a public intellectual in today's Malaysia? Because we see some academicians being charged with Sedition Act, and some public intellectual prefer to be inside within the university and do research rather than engage with the public. Perhaps you have your way of understanding or articulating what should a public intellectual be.
I think the difficulty, if we took one step back to see what is the purpose of education, education and the role of educational institutions, which include universities, is to create an environment, a learning environment, an inquiring mind to a young person. It's not a propagandist type. That means the young person has nothing on the head. You then just drop theories and thoughts, and that fills empty glass, which is the head now, or the mind. So I think what we are saying is, if education then is to help people ask the right questions, to develop an inquiry, rational mind, then I think we are at a real crisis at primary, secondary, as well as higher education. And within this context, the university becomes the area for the development of public consciousness. So the public consciousness to awaken human consciousness, the conscience, is the university. University is not just a place for technical learning. Yes, it is. Not just for knowledge and acquisition of knowledge and analysis of it, but it is to help human beings in the context of knowledge and wisdom in a key area. And I think this is important.
So how can people get the book?
The book is now available at MPH. It's available on MPH online, and it's available as hard copies in selected number of MPH. So if somebody went to the MPH website, one would get it, or they could contact us at University Kebangsaan at the Institute of Ethnic Studies, and that's also possible.
With that, thank you very much.